Hello and welcome everyone to our podcast for our upcoming book, Making Connections, a Handbook for Effective Formal Mentoring Programs in Academia. My name is Tamara Thorpe and I am your podcast host. Today, I'm very pleased to be here with our author of case study number 1 in chapter 19, Amy Hawkins. Chapter 19's case study is called Mentoring Programs for Staff of Educational Institutions, UNM Staff Council Mentorship Programs. And we have no greater expert here than Amy Hawkins, who is the administrator of the University of New Mexico Staff Council, where she oversees the efforts of 12 committees, 60 volunteer counselors, whose primary goal is to advocate for staff. Amy has earned her bachelor's degree from New Mexico State and her master's degree in public administration from UNM, and has been awarded 2 fellowships from New Mexico's Evaluation Lab and received UNM's most prestigious staff award and been the recipient of UNM Staff Council Star Award for 3 years in a row. So I do not think we could have a better person to have contributed to this chapter and share with us such an incredible case study. So hello, Amy, welcome.
Thank you so much, Tamara, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Absolutely. Easy to do when you have done all the work. So I know that there are going to be folks who are from the University of New Mexico or folks who might have a staff council on their campus. But for those who don't, can you tell us a little bit more about UNM Staff Council, and then specifically what inspired the development of a mentoring program for your staff council?
Sure. So our staff council is much like a faculty senate would be at many universities, except of course it's focused all on staff. Our staff council participates in the shared governance of the university here, and our 60 counselors advocate for staff in many different ways, but including through one-on-one meetings with campus administrators, the UNM president, the provost, our HR directors, our policy director, and our individual counselors. They have a constituency group that they are encouraged to communicate with, and then communicate those staff issues up through our staff council executive committee, which then takes those to the proper administrative office to get those staff voices really heard. I don't know exactly when the first mentoring program started at UNM in the staff council office. However, it was started by a former counselor. I've been in the role with staff council for about 4 years. And in my first year, we had a counselor bring it up and say they thought there was a need for a mentoring program within the staff council. And so we figured out a way to make it happen. Right? There had been previous versions of it, but I didn't have a lot of information. There weren't a lot of records from that. So we kind of built our own from what we knew. And it has developed into basically the case study that you'll see in this book here. And we have had several counselors in the last 2 years really show that they think it's important to continue that mentoring program. And it is really beneficial because our counselors play such a specific role within the university, completely outside of their normal paid position in the university. And there's so many different initiatives and things that we do within staff council that a mentoring program is pretty important for any of our counselors just to be able to say to someone, hey, I really have an idea about something I want to improve at the university, but I don't know how to go about it. So can we work on that together? Let's get some help. That's really what the point of the mentoring program in staff council is for.
Thanks for sharing that context. And I think lots of folks will relate. If we have program coordinators who are listening, they can relate to sort of picking up a program that maybe had been done in the past, not a lot of records, or not a clear path forward has been chartered. So you kind of have to reinvent the wheel a little bit. And so if you can share, because I not only have you reinvented the wheel, but you created a program that has seen some great successes. And as folks read through the case study, they'll see some of the real positive outcomes that have come as counselors have been able to have mentors to guide them through some processes and getting things done. So can you share with us a little bit of some of the lessons learned in terms of, picking things up from where they were and really running quite a lean program?
Sure. That's a good question. I think the main thing behind that sort of reinventing this program was someone very invested in staff council in general, and who wanted to see other counselors grow and flourish, and wanted to really help other counselors meet their goals, whether that be their own individual goals they wanted to sort of realize through staff council, or if it was a group effort, and where somebody said, I really think something within HR could be improved for staff, and how do we do this? How do we go about that? So that was the key effort, is someone in staff council who was a counselor who really wanted to see others thrive as they did.
Yeah, I thanks for sharing that, because I think one of the things that folks will note as they read through the book and some of those early chapters really talk about how important it is to have a champion and have a group of champions that can really push for and really get a program implemented.
Absolutely.
And so as you've run this program and you've run it with which folks will read in the chapter, no budget and few resources, how have you managed to sort of maximize the resources you have to build a program that has a positive impact with such few resources?
Well, again, that really comes down to our volunteer counselors and committee members. I work with a lot of strong personalities and a lot of very passionate people, right? Which is an incredibly important component in an organization like this and in a mentoring program. So that's the key behind this, is knowing and learning, which I still am after 4 years, learning how to work with those volunteer counselors and committee members to keep pushing for things that I see as beneficial to more or other staff and staff counselors. So that's kind of the key there, honestly, is working with the volunteers and in a way that they can work as a volunteer, right? Because all of our counselors, all of our committee members have full-time staff jobs of their own at the university, none which have anything to do with staff council. So, it's really on, it's really them. It's really the volunteers. They are the workhorses behind the bulk of what staff council gets done. I am largely just the facilitator and the person who says, let's figure this out. This is how we can make something happen.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So can you share a little bit more with us about the program and how it's designed? I know in your case study, you talk about aligning your program objectives and curriculum with the organizational goals as sort of an ideal scenario. So in your program, what are the objectives and curriculum, and how do they advance the goals of the staff council?
Well, that's probably where we differ the most from other mentoring programs, because a lot of our a lot of our curriculum really does depend on the individual's goal who wants to be in this program. And again, it's a volunteer program within a volunteer organization, right? So we never know how many people we're going to get to sign up for it. So that's an interesting thing on its own. However, back to the curriculum. So we do try to frame it as, okay, we looked at what the main things were that people come to staff council for, and what they're there for, what they're trying to do, what they want to do when in staff council. So we looked at those kind of main themes for staff and kind of built a curriculum around that. So for instance, shared governance, right? Well, what does that mean? One of the ways that staff council can share the viewpoints of staff with administration in a meaningful way that's not just another email to the president, or even just another discussion with one of our administrators, right? Who have, I have to say, all been really, really great to work with staff council. They're all very open to hearing things, which is pretty cool. But one of the ways that we can show the voice of staff is through written resolutions. And we often have resolutions that are worked on by a committee or a group of people. We've had one or two counselors do one just on their own that got passed. And these are written statements of these are what we see at the university. These are the facts. These are what we would like to see changed at the university. And here's why. And here's some backup resources for why we think that would be a good change. That can be, a resolution like that can be written towards a goal of changing an HR policy, towards supporting staff raises, things of that nature. So big things, that affect a lot of staff at the university. Not everyone knows how to write a resolution when they first come into the council. I know I didn't. When I came to this job, I was like, a resolution, okay, let me get my hands a little dirty in this, because I'd never done anything like that. We do also have a volunteer parliamentarian, which can also be very helpful in doing things like writing resolutions. So we have a lot of resources now for things like if you want to write a resolution. And again, I'll go back to what I was saying before. If somebody has an idea, has a goal of wanting to do something, wanting to change something, but they're not sure how, even if they think, okay, I know what a resolution is now, but I've never written one before. Where do I start? I've got a template now. We've got a parliamentarian. We've got a couple of people, that I know that I've written one myself now. So I have that sort of toolbox for many things, like a resolution, just as one of many examples, that I can say, easy. This is how we get started. And who else is interested? Let's bring all the interested parties in. And then once something like a resolution is drafted, we show that to the full council at our monthly business meetings. The full council has to approve it. So again, that goes back to sort of the weight behind something like that, right? It's not just one or two people saying this is what we think needs to happen at the university. It's a whole group of people that agree that yes, these are the things we want to see happen. And then those get sent to administration. So again, the resolution is just one example of an individual goal or something that someone wants to do, but I will draw from anywhere I can to gain resources to be able to give that counselor or group of counselors or committee members everything that they need to be successful in that goal.
So thanks for sharing that, because I think to what you said at the top was that it really speaks to a differentiating factor in your mentoring program, is that it is really driven by the individual goals that a counselor might have. So rather than there being a larger goal for the council in terms of like retention of counselors or something larger, that it really is designed to support counselors in achieving a specific end goal within their role as counselor.
Yes, and thank you for going back to that. I do tend to get into the weeds a little bit sometimes, so thank you. But yes, you're right. I mean, and if you look at our structure of committees right now, we have 13 committees, right? We have a policy review committee. We have a strategic planning committee. We have an environmental sustainability committee. We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And all of these different committees have their individualized charges. So that is also a place where a staff counselor can go to sort of realize something that they want to see happen at the university, right? For instance, if someone wants to learn more about how the university is trying to use their resources in an appropriate manner, right? Our water resources are really important here in New Mexico. Well, we have an environmental sustainability committee who is working on that very thing, right? So we do have a lot of individualized goals, and then I guess for my role, as well as making sure all counselors have those resources and things to make sure that those goals are realized, our committees are really dedicated to their own individual charges. And then you automatically have like a group of people who are interested in that topic. So our committees are an incredible resource for counselors as well.
That's fantastic. So I would love to hear, because, as we've talked about, and I hope as folks go through and read the case study, not only will they see how you've structured the program and what's gone into that curriculum design and implementation, and then also, right, the limitations you've worked with in terms of resources. Also, an important point that you made in your chapter or in your case study is that because these are counselors, that the only people who can mentor them are people who've already been counselors. So the pool of mentors you're pulling from is, for all intents and purposes, a finite group of people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very true. With the exception of a few, like our parliamentarian, who volunteers with us. He's been with the staff council for as long as they've been on campus. And so he has great input on a lot of things. And I do find that in some cases, I'm able to reach out to different departments, different administrative groups here at the university who also um, can often help with certain things. So if we don't have the resources to say how do we do something within a in a staff council initiative or a committee initiative, I will reach out to our HR resources, or our staff council president will reach out to our HR VPs and say, we would really like to work on this. What do you suggest we do? Right. So there are lots of different ways we go about it because there are so many different things that people want to do through staff council.
Well, thank you for that. And I think that folks are really going to enjoy going through and seeing what you've accomplished. And so what I would like for us to do is take a few minutes to share really for other program coordinators, and really through the lens of somebody who has put this together on your own with the resources, and leverage those resources to build a program with volunteers with no budget. So if you're going to give advice to other program coordinators who are maybe in a similar situation, what do you think in implementing a mentoring program is a must-have? What is something that you think, no matter what the circumstances, this is a must-have for a mentoring program?
Well, that's a really good question, and a really good segue into a response to a comment that you made, because I absolutely did not do this program on my own, right? This chapter of mine is mainly my observations, right, of the program that we've been able to do along with our volunteer counselors, and especially our executive committee. So the number one thing that's needed is really the interest. You really need someone to say, we need this. And I'm willing to work on it, right? That's what you need, especially when you have a limited administrative support, because again, as something I mentioned in the chapter as well, this is one very small initiative. I mean, it's not small, but it's just one piece of a lot of things that we do in staff council. And it is my job to track and keep everything moving. So I do have limited time. I do have limited money. There's no direct resources in terms of financial resources that go to the mentoring program. So it is me and our volunteers. This absolutely would not be a program without our volunteers saying this needs to happen.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I think it's something that as I'm having these conversations with folks in terms of must-haves, champions and committees and support, and those human resources really seem to be a consistent must-have. So thanks for really highlighting and putting a fine point on that. So what would be a nice to have? In terms of mood in a mentoring program, what is a nice to have?
Nice to have, again, of course, would be the financial resources part, right? Somebody that could be dedicated to just overseeing the mentoring program. I think with the research that I've done into other mentoring programs, that seems to be pretty key, especially in terms of growth and longevity. As far as the staff council mentoring program goes, without an additional person to really do the work of, consistent follow-up with the teams, right? The mentoring teams. The studies show that that's really important in a mentoring program. I don't have the bandwidth to do that. We have tried to do that with our last mentoring program, but it just didn't work out as well as it could have. If there were somebody who was literally getting paid to do that. So that's probably the nice to have, and maybe even a little more towards a must need, right, for growth and sustainability.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, right? Because to the point that you made, in order for a program to really be a quality program and to be sustainable over time, having the dedicated budget and human resources really do make a difference. And while you can absolutely pull off something great without those things, right? An ideal scenario to really grow and sustain a program that is effective is to have those resources. And I think that that's good for organizations to be mindful of as they're planning that, you can usually pull things off. And I know particularly in higher ed and in volunteer environments, whether they're in higher ed or nonprofit or, volunteer committees within, a private company, folks are used to doing a lot with very little. However, if we can invest up front and early, it can really make a difference towards that sustainability. So that's a really great point. What could you live without when it comes to mentoring programs? What could you live without?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, as one of our counselors that we have now says, there is no more doing more with less. Like we are at that point, and we see it at a lot of universities right now. But this is one of those programs where we see that. Like this is pretty much what you see in my chapter case study. That's what we can do with what we have, like no more, no less. I wish I could think of something that we could do without, but that's my true feelings on that.
Yeah.
That's where it is. That's exactly what we can accomplish with what we have.
Yeah, no, I think that's a perfect answer. I think we should stop asking people to do more with less, right? I think that very often, whether it's like the staff council at UNM or an employee resource group within a private organization, private corporation, or business, that we tend to overburden folks with additional work, additional roles, additional responsibilities, and want them to produce great things without the resources. And we can get very used to, I am somebody who has volunteered quite a bit and sat on boards, particularly in the nonprofit sector, where people are expected to solve very complex social issues with very little money. And I think when we get too used to doing more with less, that then becomes an expectation rather than a circumstance. And I think that's a perfect thing to say that we could live without.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, there is a component, right, of well, you got to be really creative, right? Like we have had to be pretty creative within staff council to get some things done, and including with this mentoring program, we've had to be a little creative. Since we don't have one dedicated person just focused on that. But yeah, there is a point, right? There is a point where, well, more creativity may not solve things anymore because
Yeah,
we're just getting to that point. If
yeah.
anyone has any, creative ideas, let me know.
Yeah, but I think that that's a great point, right? That certainly, what is it? Necessity breeds invention, I think, or something like that is the expression. And sure, we can be innovative, we can be creative, we can often find solutions. But if an organization's going to invest in their talent in a sustainable program, then it really does make sense in terms of what's the best use of resources, particularly when we know that our mentoring programs produce, yield positive results and outcomes, right?
Very true.
Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to meet with me and our audience today and to share a little bit about your case study. I hope folks really enjoy reading it and see the complexity of your program, how creative and innovative you have been, and the wonderful results that have come of it. So thank you so much for being here today, Amy.
Thank you, Tamara. So nice to meet you. And thank you again for the good interview.
Absolutely. Bye-bye, everyone.